The law firm of Sterling and Cross occupied floors 42 through 47 of the Apex Tower, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that pierced the city skyline like a shard of ice. It was 7:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, and the lobby was already a carefully choreographed dance of ambition and caffeine. Maya Chen clutched her oversized tote bag in one hand and her phone in the other, her eyes fixed on the screen as she speed-walked across the polished marble floor. Her headphones were in, her podcast was playing, and her mind was a million miles away from the physical world around her. She was late. Again. Not disastrously late, but late enough that her supervisor, the perpetually disappointed Patricia Kemper, would give her that look. That pinched, disappointed look that made Maya feel like a child who had forgotten her homework. She was a paralegal, a good one technically, but she was also chronically disorganized, perpetually flustered, and had a gift for being in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Her desk was a landslide of color-coded files that had somehow lost their organizational logic. Her calendar was a battlefield of double-booked meetings, and her coffee consumption was legendary, a caffeinated lifeline that kept her functional through 14-hour days. This particular morning, she was balancing her phone, her bag, and a venti caramel macchiato from the coffee shop 3 blocks away. The firm had perfectly good coffee, but Maya needed the ritual of the morning walk, the familiar barista who knew her order, the fleeting illusion of control before the chaos of the day consumed her. She was reading an email from Patricia, another urgent request, another file that needed to be reviewed by 9 a.m., another impossible deadline. She didn't see him. Alexander Hale stepped out of the private executive elevator at precisely 7:48 a.m. He was a vision of controlled perfection in a charcoal three-piece suit that had been tailored in London. His dark hair was immaculately styled, not a strand out of place. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, a striking pale gray, held the cold, analytical intensity of a man who had never lost a case in 7 years. He was Sterling and Cross's youngest senior partner. At 34, he was a legend in corporate law, known for his ruthless efficiency, his photographic memory, and his absolute, unwavering emotional detachment. He didn't do small talk. He didn't do office friendships. He arrived at 7:45 a.m., left at 8:00 p.m., and in between he was a legal machine. The associates whispered about him in hushed, reverent tones. Hale doesn't smile. Hale never loses. Hale once made a CEO cry in a deposition. He was feared, respected, and utterly alone. He was checking his watch, mentally cataloging his day when the collision happened. Maya, eyes still glued to her phone, turned the corner toward the main elevators at full speed. Alexander, stepping forward with his usual precise stride, moved directly into her path. The impact was inevitable. She crashed into him with the force of a small, caffeinated hurricane. Her phone flew from her hand, skittering across the marble floor. Her tote bag swung wildly, papers exploding into the air like confetti. And the coffee, that beautiful, expensive, scalding hot caramel macchiato, arced through the air in a graceful, catastrophic trajectory. It hit him dead center. The entire front of his immaculate suit, from his silk tie to his crisp white shirt to his perfectly pressed vest, was instantly drenched in sticky, caramel-streaked coffee. Time stopped. The lobby, which had been buzzing with morning activity, fell into a shocked, absolute silence. 23 people, from senior associates to mail room clerks, froze mid-step, their eyes wide with horror. This was not just a spilled coffee. This was a career-ending apocalypse. Maya looked up, her headphones dangling around her neck, her face slowly draining of all color as she registered what she had just done. Standing before her, coffee dripping from his chin, his expression one of icy, controlled fury, was Alexander Hale. "Oh God! Oh God, oh God, oh God!" She began, her voice a strangled whisper. "You," he said, his voice a low, dangerous blade of frost. Just destroyed a $4,000 suit. His pale gray eyes locked onto hers, and she felt as if she were being dissected, catalogued, and found utterly, irredeemably wanting. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The cold, quiet fury radiating from him was more terrifying than any tantrum. "I am so sorry," Maya stammered, dropping to her knees, frantically trying to gather the scattered papers, her hands shaking. "I wasn't looking. I was reading an email. I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry." "Stop," he commanded. She froze, a half-crumpled legal brief clutched in her hand. He pulled a white handkerchief from his pocket with the precision of a surgeon and began dabbing at the coffee stain with calm, methodical movements. It was clearly futile. The damage was done. "What department?" he asked, his voice clipped. Corporate litigation," she whispered. "I'm a paralegal, Maya Chen." His eyes narrowed slightly, as if committing her name to some internal blacklist. "Miss Chen," he said, each word enunciated with surgical precision, "I suggest you develop a habit of watching where you're going. Incompetence is not an attractive quality in this firm." He didn't wait for a response. He turned on his heel, coffee still dripping from his vest, and walked toward the executive elevator with the same unshakable dignity, as if he were wearing a crown instead of a layer of caramel macchiato. The elevator doors closed behind him. The lobby exhaled. Maya remained on the floor, surrounded by scattered papers and her own crushing humiliation, feeling the weight of 24 pitying and horrified stares. Her phone buzzed, a text from her coworker and only real friend at the firm, Jamie Park. "Did you just dump coffee on Alexander Hale? Start packing your desk." By 10:00 a.m., the story had spread through all 6 floors of Sterling and Cross like wildfire. The details grew more dramatic with each retelling. In some versions, Maya had thrown the coffee at him. In others, she'd been drunk. By the time it reached the mail room, she had allegedly attacked him with a scalding beverage while screaming about corporate oppression. Maya sat at her desk, her head in her hands, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. She spent the last 2 hours meticulously avoiding eye contact with everyone, completing her file review with the grim focus of a condemned prisoner finishing a last meal. Patricia Kemper, her supervisor, had stopped by her desk exactly once, given her the look, and said in a tone dripping with second-hand embarrassment, "Really, Maya? Alexander Hale." Jamie, her one ally, had brought her a replacement coffee and a donut as a form of silent solidarity. "It's not that bad," Jamie lied unconvincingly. "Maybe he'll forget about it." "He's Alexander Hale," Maya said miserably. "He doesn't forget anything. He has a photographic memory. I'm doomed." "Well," Jamie said, trying to be helpful, "at least he didn't yell at you." "That's worse. If he'd yelled, it would be over. The cold fury, that's the kind of thing that lingers. That's the kind of thing that follows you." At 10:37 a.m., her phone rang. The caller ID displayed a single, terrifying word, executive. Her hand trembled as she picked up. "Maya Chen," she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Chen?" The voice on the other end was female, crisp, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was Lillian Grant, Alexander Hale's executive assistant, a woman who guarded his time and attention like a dragon guarding treasure. "Mr. Hale would like to see you in his office. Immediately." The line went dead. Jamie, who had been listening with wide, sympathetic eyes, mouthed the words, "Oh no." Maya stood up, her legs feeling like jelly. The walk from the 43rd floor to the 46th floor executive wing felt like a condemned prisoner's march to the gallows. Associates and junior partners parted in the hallways as she passed, their whispers following her like a funeral procession. The executive floor was a different world. Where the lower floors were open-plan chaos, this was hushed, carpeted luxury. Original art hung on the walls, the air smelled of leather and old money. Lillian Grant's desk sat outside Alexander Hale's corner office like a fortress gate. She looked up as Maya approached, her expression one of professional disdain. "He's expecting you," Lillian said. "Go in." Maya knocked softly on the heavy wooden door. "Enter," came the cold, familiar voice. She pushed the door open and stepped into the lion's den. Alexander Hale's office was exactly what she expected: immaculate, minimalist, and intimidating. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city. A massive dark wood desk sat in the center, its surface empty except for a laptop, a single file, and a fountain pen. Behind the desk sat the man himself. He had changed, of course. The coffee-stained suit was gone, replaced by an equally impeccable navy ensemble. His hair was still perfect. His expression was still carved from ice. "Sit," he said, not looking up from the document he was reading. Maya sat in the chair across from him, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. She folded her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. He continued reading for exactly 30 seconds, a power move so obvious it would have been comical if she weren't terrified. Then, finally, he closed the file, set it aside, and looked at her. Those pale gray eyes, analytical and unsettling, fixed on her face. "Do you know why you're here, Miss Chen?" he asked. "To fire me," she whispered. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face. "No," he said, "though I imagine you've spent the morning assuming that was inevitable." She nodded mutely. "You're here," he continued, "because I've reviewed your file." "Wait, what?" He opened a manila folder on his desk, her personnel file. "Maya Chen, age 28, paralegal for 3 years, undergraduate degree from State University, graduated summa cum laude, LSAT score of 172, accepted to 4 top-tier law schools." He looked up, his expression unreadable. "You never enrolled." Her stomach dropped. This was not the conversation she'd expected. "No," she said quietly, "I didn't." "Why?" The question hung in the air. She could lie, make up some professional-sounding excuse, but something about the directness of his gaze made deflection feel impossible. "Student loans," she said simply. "My parents own a small restaurant. They couldn't help. I had undergrad debt. Taking on more for law school felt impossible, so I got a job. I figured I'd save up, reapply later." "And yet you're still here, a paralegal, making $58,000 a year when you could be on track to make 6 times that as an attorney." The casual precision with which he knew her salary was unnerving. "I got comfortable," she admitted. "Scared, maybe. It's easier to stay than to risk failing." He leaned back in his chair, studying her with that unsettling intensity. "You made a mistake this morning," he said. "A careless, avoidable mistake caused by inattention and poor time management." She nodded, her cheeks burning. "However," he continued, "I don't fire people for accidents. I fire them for incompetence, dishonesty, or laziness. Your work record indicates you're guilty of none of those. Disorganized, yes. Clumsy, apparently. But your legal analysis is excellent. Patricia Kemper complains about your time management, but she also told me last quarter that you're the best researcher in the department." Maya blinked. Patricia had said that. "I'm offering you an opportunity, Miss Chen," Alexander said. He pushed a document across the desk toward her. "I need a junior associate for a new case. It's high stakes, complex, and will require long hours. The firm will sponsor your law school education on the condition that you work for Sterling and Cross for 3 years post-graduation." She stared at the document, her mind reeling. This was a dream offer, the kind of opportunity that didn't just fall into your lap. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why me? You don't even know me." "I know your work," he corrected. "And I know talent when I see it, even when it's buried under disorganization and coffee stains." For the first time, the ghost of something that might have been a smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "You have until 5:00 p.m. to decide," he said. "This offer expires then. If you accept, you'll start immediately. Report to Lillian. She'll provide the details." He opened another file, his attention already shifting away from her, dismissing her without another word. Maya stood on shaky legs, clutching the offer letter, and walked toward the door in a daze. As her hand touched the doorknob, his voice stopped her. "Miss Chen." She turned. He still wasn't looking at her, his eyes on the document in front of him. "Next time," he said, "watch where you're going." This time she was certain. The corner of his mouth had definitely quirked upward. Maya spent her lunch break in the small, depressing break room on the 43rd floor, staring at the offer letter as if it were a lottery ticket she couldn't quite believe was real. Jamie sat across from her, reading over her shoulder, letting out increasingly high-pitched noises of disbelief. "This is insane," Jamie said for the 5th time. "Alexander Hale doesn't mentor people. Alexander Hale doesn't even talk to people unless absolutely necessary, and he's offering to pay for your law school." "It's conditional," Maya said, rereading the terms again. 3-year commitment to the firm after graduation. If I quit early, I pay it all back with interest." "That's standard for these kinds of deals," Jamie countered. "Maya, this is a golden ticket. People would kill for this opportunity." "But why me?" Maya asked, voicing the question that had been gnawing at her all morning. "There are dozens of paralegals here. Why offer this to the one who literally assaulted him with coffee?" Jamie leaned back, thinking. Maybe that's exactly why. You got his attention. In 3 years at this firm, Alexander Hale has never once looked at you, right? Maya nodded. "And now he has. You're memorable. In this place, that's half the battle." At 4:47 p.m., Maya stood outside Lillian Grant's desk, the signed offer letter in her hand. Her hands were still shaking slightly, but her decision was made. She was terrified, yes, but she was also hungry. Hungry to prove that the girl who'd been too scared to go to law school could actually make it. Lillian took the letter without comment, scanned it with a practiced eye, and then looked up at Maya with an expression that might have been the faintest hint of approval. "You start tomorrow," Lillian said. 6:00 a.m. Mr. Hale doesn't tolerate lateness. I suggest you invest in an alarm clock and a travel mug with a lid." The faintest ghost of humor in that last comment surprised Maya enough that she smiled. "Yes, ma'am." "Lillian is fine," the assistant said. "And Miss Chen, congratulations. You're either very brave or very foolish, possibly both." Maya arrived at 5:53 a.m. the next morning, clutching a sealed travel mug of coffee like a talisman. The executive floor was eerily quiet, the lights still dim. She found Lillian already at her desk, looking as crisp and alert as if it were noon. "Conference room B," Lillian said. "He's waiting." Maya's stomach did a nervous flip. She walked down the hall to the glass-walled conference room and stopped in the doorway. Alexander Hale sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by stacks of files, his laptop open, 3 monitors set up, all displaying different documents. He was reading, making notes, his focus absolute. "You're early," he said without looking up. "Good, sit." She sat 3 chairs down from him, setting her coffee carefully on the table, well away from any important documents. "The case," he began, finally looking at her, "is Meridian Tech versus Innovate Solutions. Meridian is our client. They're accusing Innovate of stealing proprietary AI technology developed under a joint venture agreement. The technology is worth approximately $300 million. Innovate claims they developed it independently. We go to trial in 6 weeks. He slid a thick binder across the table to her. "This is background. Contracts, emails, technical specifications, depositions. You have 72 hours to read and understand all of it. Then you'll brief me on the 3 weakest points in our case." Maya opened the binder. It was easily 800 pages. "Three weakest points?" she asked. "Shouldn't I focus on the strengths?" He looked at her, those pale gray eyes assessing. "Anyone can identify strengths," he said. "That's easy. Weaknesses are what lose cases. If you can find them before opposing counsel does, you can neutralize them. That's the difference between a good lawyer and a great one." He returned to his laptop. "You can work here or at your new desk. Lillian will show you. I expect your analysis Monday morning, 6:00 a.m. Do not be late. Do not be unprepared. Questions?" She had about 1,000, but the look on his face suggested now was not the time. "No, sir." "Hale is fine," he corrected. "We'll be working closely. Formality wastes time." She nodded and gathered the massive binder. As she stood to leave, he spoke again. "Miss Chen." She turned. "This isn't law school. I'm not going to hold your hand or give you participation trophies. You'll work harder than you've ever worked in your life. You'll question whether this was a mistake. But if you survive, you'll be a better lawyer than 90% of the people in this building." He paused, his expression unreadable. "Don't disappoint me." The next 72 hours were a blur of coffee, highlighters, and very little sleep. Maya commandeered a corner of the conference room and built a fortress of files around herself. She read contracts until the words blurred. She created timelines. She cross-referenced emails with technical specifications, trying to understand the intricacies of AI development when her background was in liberal arts. She ordered dinner to the office. She went home only to shower and change. She began to understand why the associates on this floor looked perpetually exhausted. But she also began to understand something else. The case was fascinating. The deeper she dug, the more she saw the strategy behind it. The joint venture agreement had a clause buried on page 47 that was worded just ambiguously enough that both sides could claim ownership. The technical specifications used terminology that was inconsistent with industry standards, making it impossible to determine exact timelines of development. It was a beautiful, complicated mess. And somewhere in that mess were the three weaknesses Alexander Hale had challenged her to find. On Sunday night at 11:47 p.m., she found the third one. It was buried in a deposition. A single offhand comment from Meridian's own CTO that, if Innovate's lawyers were smart enough to spot it, could undermine their entire timeline argument. She leaned back in her chair, exhausted and exhilarated. She'd done it. Monday morning, 5:58 a.m. Maya stood outside the conference room, her analysis printed and bound, her second travel mug of coffee in hand. She was running on 4 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline. At precisely 6:00 a.m., she knocked. "Enter." Alexander Hale sat in the same position as Thursday morning, as if he'd never left. For all she knew, he hadn't. "Well," he said. She sat across from him and slid her report across the table. "Weakness 1," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "The joint venture termination date. Our contract says the venture ended on March 15th, but Meridian continued sharing data through March 30th. If Innovate can prove they used only post-termination data, they can argue it was outside the contract's IP protection." He listened, his face unreadable. "Weakness 2. The technical lead on our side, Dr. Sarah Kim, has a non-compete violation in her past. It's unrelated to this case, but if Innovate digs into her background, they can use it to question her credibility regarding independent development." His eyes narrowed slightly, interest. "Weakness 3, she took a breath. "Our own CTO in his deposition, page 247, says, we always knew the collaboration would be messy. That single word, messy, implies anticipated complications with IP separation. It suggests we entered the joint venture knowing ownership would be disputed. It undermines our claim that Innovate's actions were unexpected theft. Silence. Alexander Hale leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled, his gaze fixed on her. The silence stretched, 5 seconds, 10. She resisted the urge to fidget. Finally, he spoke. You found the CTO comment. Yes. Do you know how many senior associates reviewed that deposition? No. 4, not one of them flagged that line. He leaned forward, and for the first time since she'd met him, something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Your analysis is thorough, well-reasoned, and actionable. Well done. The praise coming from him felt like winning an Olympic gold medal. Now, he continued, all business again, tell me how we neutralize each weakness. Her preparation hadn't extended that far. I don't know yet, she admitted. Then figure it out. You have until Wednesday. He returned to his laptop, dismissing her. As she gathered her materials, he spoke without looking up. You worked all weekend. It wasn't a question. Yes. Don't make a habit of it. Exhaustion breeds mistakes. Manage your time better. She blinked. Was he concerned about her well-being? Yes, sir, I mean Hale. As she reached the door, he added, Your coffee, you didn't spill it once in 3 days. She turned, confused. The barest hint of a smirk touched his lips. Progress, Miss Chen, progress. 3 weeks into working with Alexander Hale, Maya began to notice things. Small things, things that didn't fit the ice-cold reputation. He noticed when she'd been at the office past midnight. The next morning, he'd schedule their meeting for 8 a.m. instead of 6 a.m., giving her time to sleep. When she mentioned struggling with a particular legal concept, he left a book on her desk the next day. No note, no explanation, just the book marked with sticky tabs at the relevant chapters. He was still demanding, still terrifyingly precise, still emotionally unavailable in every conventional sense. But beneath that frozen exterior, she began to detect the faintest warmth, like standing near a glacier and realizing there was sunlight deep within the ice. One Thursday evening at 7:00 p.m., they were in the conference room reviewing witness prep. Maya was exhausted, running on her 3rd coffee of the afternoon, stumbling over her words. The technical specifications indicate no, wait, demonstrate. She paused, rubbing her eyes. Sorry, indicate. They indicate that. Stop, Alexander said. She looked up, expecting criticism. Instead, he closed his laptop. You're exhausted. You've been here since 6:00 a.m. Go home. But we haven't finished. We've done enough for today. He stood, gathering his things with efficient movements. Diminishing returns, Miss Chen. Your analysis is excellent when you're sharp. Right now you're running on fumes. Go home, sleep, come back tomorrow ready to think. She stared at him, surprised. Are you concerned about me? He paused, his hand on his briefcase, and looked at her with those unreadable gray eyes. I'm concerned about the quality of your work, he said, which suffers when you're exhausted. It's pragmatic, not personal. But there was something in his tone, something that made her think the line between pragmatic and personal was blurrier than he wanted to admit. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once and walked toward the door. Then he stopped. Maya. It was the first time he'd used her first name. She looked up. You're doing well, he said, not looking at her. Better than I expected, keep it up. He left before she could respond. Maya sat alone in the conference room, a strange warmth blooming in her chest. It wasn't the praise itself, though that felt good. It was the fact that he'd said her name, that he'd noticed her exhaustion, that beneath the ice there was a person who cared even if he'd never admit it. She packed up her things, a small smile on her face. She was beginning to understand Alexander Hale, And that, she realized, was more dangerous than any legal case. The gala was a nightmare dressed in formal wear and champagne. Sterling and Cross's annual client appreciation event was held at the Grandview Hotel, a glittering monument to excess where partners mingled with CEOs, and Maya felt like an imposter in a borrowed dress. She'd been required to attend. Alexander had been explicit. "You're part of the Meridian team now. Clients expect to see a united front." So here she was, in a simple black cocktail dress she'd bought on sale. Clutching a glass of champagne she was too nervous to drink, watching Alexander Hale work the room like the apex predator he was. He was in his element, charming when necessary, intimidating when useful, always 3 steps ahead of every conversation. He'd introduced her to the Meridian executives, his hand a brief, professional touch on her lower back that had sent an entirely inappropriate shiver down her spine. She hated that she'd noticed, hated that the cold, brilliant lawyer she worked for was objectively, undeniably attractive, hated that she was developing feelings that had no place in a professional relationship. She was getting some air on the balcony when she heard the voice. "So you're Alexander's new project." She turned to find a woman standing in the doorway, tall, elegant, with sharp features and a designer gown that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Her smile was all teeth and no warmth. "I'm sorry," Maya said. "Vanessa Cross," the woman said, stepping onto the balcony. "Partner, corporate division." Maya recognized the name. Cross as in Sterling and Cross, as in founding family. "Maya Chen," she said, shaking the offered hand. "I'm working with Hale on the Meridian case." "Yes, I heard," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with something Maya couldn't quite identify. "Alexander's been spending quite a bit of time mentoring you. That's unusual for him." "He's an excellent teacher," Maya said carefully. "Oh, I'm sure he is." Vanessa sipped her champagne, her eyes assessing. "You should be careful, though. Alexander doesn't do personal attachments. He had a fiancée once, 4 years ago, Catherine Bardot, beautiful woman, brilliant lawyer. They were the firm's golden couple." Maya's stomach sank. She didn't want to hear this, but she couldn't stop listening. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Vanessa's smile turned sharp. "She died, car accident. Alexander was supposed to be with her that night, but he chose to stay late at the office for a case. She went alone. He blamed himself, and he's been an emotionless machine ever since." The revelation hit Maya like a physical blow. Suddenly everything made sense. The control, the distance, the walls. "He doesn't let anyone in anymore," Vanessa continued. "So whatever you think is happening between you two, it's not. You're a project, a distraction. Don't mistake professional interest for anything more." She finished her champagne and walked back inside, leaving Maya alone on the balcony, her heart aching for a man who turned himself into ice to avoid being hurt again. When she returned inside, she found Alexander standing with a group of executives, his expression neutral, his posture perfect. But when his eyes met hers across the room, something flickered in them. Concern, maybe, question. She gave him a small, forced smile. His eyes narrowed. He knew something was wrong. The case went to trial on a Monday. 6 weeks of preparation culminated in a downtown courtroom with dark wood paneling and a judge known for his lack of patience. Maya sat at the defense table beside Alexander, her heart hammering, her hands folded to keep them from shaking. She'd helped prepare every aspect of this case. She knew it inside and out. But this was the first time she'd ever sat at counsel's table during an actual trial. Alexander was in his element. Calm, precise, devastating, he dismantled opposing counsel's arguments with surgical precision. He anticipated every objection. He was a master watching a performance he'd choreographed down to the second. During a brief recess, they stood in the hallway. Alexander was reviewing notes, his focus absolute. You're quiet, he said without looking up. Nervous, she admitted. Don't be, we're winning. How can you be so sure? He looked at her then, his gray eyes intense. Because I'm always sure. Confidence isn't arrogance if you're always right. It should have sounded cocky. Instead, it was just true. Can I ask you something? She said before she could stop herself. He closed his notebook. Yes. Why did you really offer me this opportunity? The truth. He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You remind me of someone, he said finally. Someone who was brilliant and passionate and saw law as a calling, not just a career. Catherine, Maya said softly. His entire body went rigid. His eyes turned to ice. Who told you that name? Vanessa at the gala. Vanessa, he repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, should learn to mind her own business. It's true, isn't it? That's why you chose me. I'm a replacement, a way too. Stop, the command was sharp. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me, she challenged, her own frustration bubbling over. Tell me the truth, because I'm tired of feeling like a ghost in someone else's story. The bailiff appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes, counsel. Alexander gave a curt nod, then turned back to Maya. We'll discuss this later, he said, his tone back to cold, professional distance. No, Maya said, surprising herself. We'll discuss it now. Did you hire me because I remind you of her? His jaw clenched. For the first time since she'd met him, Alexander Hale looked rattled. Yes, he said finally. At first. You had the same fire, the same way of seeing problems, but that's not why I kept working with you. Then why? Because you're not her, he said, his voice low. You're you, and somewhere in the last month I stopped seeing her and started seeing you. And that, he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that stole her breath, terrifies me. The bailiff called them back. They walked into the courtroom side by side, but everything between them had shifted. They won. The jury deliberated for 7 hours and came back with a unanimous verdict in favor of Meridian Tech. $300 million awarded. Innovate Solutions ordered to cease all use of the disputed technology. It was a complete, total victory. The Meridian executives celebrated with champagne in Sterling and Cross's main conference room. Partners congratulated Alexander. Maya stood to the side, watching, still processing the conversation from the courthouse. When the celebration finally wound down, when the clients had left and the office grew quiet, Alexander found her in the conference room where they'd spent so many long hours. She was packing up files, putting the case to bed. You should be celebrating, he said from the doorway. I am, she said, in my own way. He walked into the room, his hands in his pockets, his usual armor slightly loosened. I owe you an apology, he said. She looked up, surprised. You were right at the courthouse. I did hire you because you reminded me of Catherine. She believed I was too cold, too detached. She wanted me to mentor younger lawyers, to share what I knew. I resisted. And then she died, and I realized she'd been right. He leaned against the table, his eyes distant. When I saw you, when I read your file, I thought it was a chance to honor her memory, to finally do what she'd asked. But you were right about something else, too. What? Maya asked softly. You're not a ghost, you're not a replacement, you're... He paused, struggling with words in a way she'd never seen. You're extraordinary on your own, and I've been a fool not to see that from the beginning. Maya's heart was hammering. What are you saying, Alexander? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the ice in his eyes had melted completely. I'm saying that somewhere between the coffee incident and this trial, I started caring about you. Not as a project, not as a memory, as you. He took a step closer. And I don't know what to do with that. Maya set down the file she was holding. "You could start," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "by admitting you're human, that you're allowed to feel things, that being cold and controlled hasn't protected you from pain. It's just made you lonely." "I am lonely," he admitted, the words raw. "I've been lonely for 4 years, but loneliness felt safer than risk." "And now?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the conflict in his eyes, the war between control and desire. "Now," he said softly, "I'm terrified, but I'm also tired of being cold." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. "Tell me I'm not imagining this," he said. "Tell me you feel it too." "I feel it," she whispered. "I've felt it for weeks." He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft, tentative, as if he were learning how to do this again after years of denying himself. But then Maya's hands found his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened, all the weeks of tension and unspoken feelings pouring out. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to be open." "Then we'll figure it out together," Maya said. "One disaster at a time." He laughed, actually laughed. It was a rusty, unpracticed sound, but it was real. "Starting with coffee?" he asked, a hint of that rare smile on his lips. "Starting with coffee," she agreed. "But this time I promise not to spill it on you." "I don't know," he said, pulling her close again. "That disaster turned out rather well." 6 months later, Maya Chen walked into Sterling and Cross at 7:45 a.m., a sealed travel mug in one hand and her briefcase in the other. She nodded to Lillian, who actually smiled now, and walked into the conference room where Alexander was already working. "Morning," she said, setting coffee and a pastry on the table beside him. "You're late," he said without looking up. "By 2 minutes. Still late." She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "Sue me." He caught her hand, pulling her down for a proper kiss. "Don't tempt me. I'm an excellent litigator." She laughed and sat beside him, pulling up her own laptop. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from spending long hours together, from learning each other's rhythms. At one point, she glanced over at him. He was focused, his brows slightly furrowed, his mind 3 steps ahead as always. "What?" he asked, sensing her stare. "Nothing," she said. I never thought I'd see the day when Alexander Hale looked happy." He considered this, then reached over and took her hand. "Neither did I," he admitted. "Turns out all it took was a disorganized paralegal with terrible spatial awareness and a catastrophic coffee incident." "Best mistake I ever made," Maya said. Alexander smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Mine too."